Hey, everybody. Welcome to Leading Thriving Cities. My name is Chad Wright. I'm the founder of Forward Partners. This is our show where we shine a spotlight on leaders in public service, and we have deep conversations about sustainability and how we create a thriving future for our cities. Today's guest is Michael Paulhus. He is the town manager of Plainville, Connecticut, and we have a great conversation about creativity and storytelling. Michael's been on a journey to really up the storytelling game that they're doing in their city, and they are seeing some incredible results from it. This is something that a lot of cities struggle with. I know you're going to find so much value from this episode. Thank you for joining us on Leading Thriving Cities. Michael, thank you so much for being on Leading Thriving Cities. I've been looking forward to this specifically because obviously we're based in Texas, and so a lot of our guests are based in Texas. And you're going to give us maybe a different perspective being from out of state. And so I'm really excited about that. So thank you for being here.
Well, thank you, Chad, for the opportunity, and I'd love to be there. I wish I could. Cowboys fan.
We talked earlier.
Full disclosure, Cowboys fan. Yeah.
Yeah, you were trying to make this pair up with a Cowboys trip, but that might not have gone over particularly well. So that makes sense. One of the reasons we're doing this is we really want people to understand public service very deeply. And we'll talk later about y'all's efforts in terms of storytelling. Y'all are doing such a great job there. But part of this is if people really understand what public service looks like and the professionals that are doing this sacred work, we're going to get the resources we need to actually do this well. And so part of this project is help people understand the jobs. And so I'm curious, what would, as a town manager, as a city manager, what would you have people understand about your role and the work that you do?
Well, that's a great question, great leading question. In terms of, I like to say in local government, it's a process. We're not private. We're not trying to be like the private sector. I mean, we're a different animal, and we're trying to do the best we can to service residents within our community. And I think we're all in it together in terms of we're partners, right? So. We want to think of ourselves as a desirable community. And so that means that, how do we educate children in our school systems? And people look at that when choosing communities. And so what do you look like in terms of what's your profile? Are you doing well at educating the children? Are your school system solid? And, is the community safe? Do people feel like they have recreational opportunities within the community? So they start to paint their own picture based on what they've seen and heard about a community. So local government, I think our job to provide services, but also we develop a lot of policies. And so that process and the democratic process, it's sometimes messy, but
Yes.
the goal to be fair and equitable in terms of how we provide services and what we do. So it's a very complex thing that I like to focus with the team in terms of breaking it down and being as transparent as we possibly can, and explaining and doing as much as we can to explain the programs and the services that we provide.
One of the things you mentioned there was we're partners, because you really are. You're partners with the citizens, you're partners with other big entities, the school districts, the things like that. What have you done, and where have you seen success in helping your team embrace this idea that y'all are not just the city? It is this partnership with all these other different groups. Have you been able to get them to shift their mindset to really embrace that idea?
Yeah, I think we have, for sure. And I think Plainville is a great model. And just to give you some context of Connecticut, very small state, as you know, compared to Texas, right? But we have 169 separate municipalities or cities and towns, no county government. It's all just towns, and 169 of them compact in Connecticut. And the local government side and the Board of Education side are typically in most communities separate entities, right? Separate operations. Here in Plainville, some time ago, made the leap to combine the finances of the Board of Education and the town, along with, so
Wow.
post services in terms of the finance department, the technology department, human resources department, and now social media. And that was one of the examples in terms of our partnership that we were trying to get a middle school um, redeveloped, and instead of building new, renovate like new. So a $61 million bond package passed by the voters, and we used social media effectively to get that passed in a very short time frame. In fact, it's probably likely be part of my talk when I present at ICM in October of this year in Tampa,
Mhm.
and that is an example that the Board of Education saw the value of that and said, "Hey, listen, let's make that person a full-time person that we share." And again, and that so we went to our 4th department in terms of shared services, in terms of social
Yeah.
media. So that partnership is strong. A lot of communities, it's walled off, and if you don't mess in our sandbox, we don't mess in your sandbox. For us,
I it's funny
we're
you say that because I was just in a city the other day, and they were talking about how the advances they're making as a city, and they're like, "You know what's holding us back? School board. They got a crazy school board, and we don't know what to do about this because it is genuinely costing the entire city money and really our future." And so the fact that y'all have integrated these 2 things is fascinating. Is
mm.
that fairly common in your area, or is that unusual?
No, I think there's only, less than 4 communities that have tried it or effectively are doing it, and so Plainville was one of the, early leaders, with a f one or 2 other communities. Yeah, it doesn't
That's
it's hard.
interesting.
It's a high bar or hurdle, if you will, to overcome, but I think it is a smart move, and it's something that, was already established here, before I got here. It was just the social media aspect that I was a part of, once I got here.
Yeah. And, you and I connected on LinkedIn originally, and part of that is because I think we both put out a crazy amount of content. We are constantly,
Right.
I'm passionate about leadership and public
Yeah.
service, and you're passionate about your city and the things y'all are doing. And so, one of the things I've noticed is you do produce a regular amount of content and really focus on telling the city's story well. And as you've gone on that journey, is that a fairly recent journey, or is that something you've been really focused on developing for years now?
No, recent. In fact, how it started, I came here from another community in Connecticut to Plainville. And in the interview process and hiring process, it was the council letting me know that the previous manager was monitoring Facebook, the local Plainville Talks Facebook page. And please monitor that, try to clarify, and so that kind of put me on a path to developing skills in terms of social media. And it just so 2022 was my really something that, Facebook was like, okay, I don't want to really have to do that, but it's part of the job now. I better jump into it. And I jumped in like most things with both feet and just learned as much as I could and said, "Okay, that's how I got to, trying to build a team," which we've done, and now, yes, we're turning out crazy amounts of content across all major platforms except for X or Twitter.
Mm.
So
Yeah. Yeah. As you've kinda gone on that journey, have you seen the relationship with your citizens change? Has it gotten
absolutely.
better? Has it gotten worse? What kinda change have you seen as you've told your story more consistently?
Much better. Yeah, engagement is so important, and I think I've now learned that social media is not only the problem, but the solution. And that's where we take the high road and go with engagement, to build a relationship, to talk about being transparent, talk about, explaining things, and people really enjoy it. They'll stop us when we're on the street. They'll stop us at meetings. Will stop us at functions. We're, recently, at a tournament and a fundraiser for the local food pantry, and they'll people will stop and say they love the manager's minute. They love, seeing the information and content that we're putting out. And we try. At first, we thought of the business partnerships, again, back to partnerships, and
Hmm.
helping put a spotlight on local businesses, starting with restaurants, which were the low hanging fruit and easy way to do it, because they often have some followings that we can collaborate on and share information and followers to promote them. So we started with that, and then we just kept working into other entities that approached us and said, "Hey, can you do a spot with us?" And so we do the best we can to fit them into the schedule, but then also talk about municipal service. And I like to say that in local government, there's no shortage of content. There's in terms of what
Hmm.
you can talk about. And because I think a lot of times we take for granted what we know, we think the public knows because we put it out there, but we, realizing their busy lives don't allow them to be up to speed on everything. But as you know, everyone's living right here on the phone, right? So
Hmm.
we're putting out social media content, hoping that we'll make some inroads, develop engagement with the community. It is working. We're now moving to to try to quantify that and track that beyond our own, social media analytics and our metrics
Right.
there. Is trying to get actual, feedback on that. But anecdotally, it's been just, hey, I saw that on Facebook. I saw that on Instagram. That was a great piece. We love that. Can you do this? So now we're at the point they want to hear about something specific.
And it's a very interesting tool for both education and relationship building because I think there's something about content like this, even where people get a feel for who you are, they get to know you. And so then when they see a post by the city manager, it's not this nameless, faceless person. It's Michael, who they have seen on all these videos, and they know the cadence of how he speaks, and they see him smile at the camera, and there's this kind of connection there. Even though it's not the same as if we're sitting in a room, there is still a connection there, and people meet you and feel like they know you. And there's something to that that starts it kinda I don't know that it's a relationship, but it's the seeds of a relationship, and that
Mhm.
can grow over time, and so as y'all have kinda started to plant those seeds and started to do that, where have y'all gotten really creative? Because everybody I know in public service, we are all giant nerds. I Part of why I love this show is I love learning. I'm fascinated by the idea of integrating the city and the school district. I think that's a really, really interesting. I will admit not everybody will think that's interesting, but I really do. And so I think there's something to the creativity of saying, how do we tell our story in things that people might think are mundane, but are actually super interesting if we tell it in the right way? Have y'all been able to get really creative about some of that storytelling?
Well, that's it. Storytelling for me is the next frontier, right? About, okay, step 1, learn about social media and the platforms and how they work and how you develop content that is, relevant to each platform. And now the storytelling aspect and how to grab the attention, writing the right hooks and terms of video. And so storytelling to me is the next frontier, the next level, and doing that. And so we are working collaboratively, internally with the team and trying to broaden that to our departments and the school system side, looking for ways to collaborate, but also in our business community with the Chamber of Commerce is very active, very
Mm.
good partner with us. And I think there's great upside to that in terms of what communities have to offer. And it's there's so many things that we just can't get to because there's time constraints, as you know, right? And you're doing podcasts and so forth. So it
It's a lot of
I
work.
it's a lot of work, but it's amazing that things like just simple road projects, right? So we have the ability to get the assistance of our police department to put up a drone and to film a new paving project we're doing, and showing that video in there is you wouldn't believe people get just like that. That's great. We loved the video of seeing Whiting Street or Broad Street and how the repaving was working, and or any other spot that we want to showcase the town. They don't often get to see that, but we go in detail to say, yeah, we're doing the culvert, we're doing the gas line, we're coordinating with the utilities. They have to put in a gas main, they're putting in a water main as well. And obviously, we're trying to do what we can to coordinate services so we don't have to rip up the road, 6 months from now when, they want to upgrade their services. It does always work. And we've had some heartaches with that, with respect to our utilities that we're trying to work through.
Yeah.
But it does work, and it's enlightening for a lot of
Yes.
people, and or
And it
it
as I
just
say, it gives context, which is so
yes,
helpful because ultimately, if I'm driving down the road and I encounter road construction and I have no idea why they're doing it, I have no idea what it's for, all I am is inconvenienced. And at that point, I'm probably also irritated and not thinking great things about the city who's always tearing our streets up, right? And now that becomes the story in my head, and that's what I start to look for, and that's what I find. But if we say, no, here's why we're doing this, you're giving them the context of vision. Here's what it's going to be like when it's done. Here's why this really matters. And once we explain why, most people are going to go, okay, you're making the place better. Do I like road construction? No. Am I excited about everything being better? Yes. And that becomes really helpful, that just the context of why.
yeah. No, and so, again, on the same theme of roads, we're now proceeding with issuing a $6 million bond in June for our next round of bond funding for road pavement and infrastructure process, which we've done successfully the last 10 years, and we're now at the end of that bond, and we're looking to do more because just roads in general have a lifespan that we try to get 25 years if we can, if we're lucky, in New England. So it's all pretty much all asphalt, and we're doing the best we can to show citizens, okay, where's your road on the list, here's where it is, here's our paving schedule, upcoming season. Okay, we're notifying you, trying to make sure that
Yep.
you're aware of that, and why we're doing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. And we were talking before we started about how I've heard a city manager say, if we're doing a really good job, nobody knows we're here. And that ultimately kind of does a disservice, because then the only time they see you is when something breaks.
Right.
And you're doing the hard work of relationship building and education, so that when something breaks, it's not, well, this incompetent city that has things that always break. It's, oh man, I actually love those guys and I understand they're doing the best they can.
Yeah.
That becomes really helpful, because one of the things you point out is that that's not the time to build relationship, is when the water main breaks. It's well before that.
Right. Yeah, no, you hit the nail on the head there. I agree with you 100%. That may have been the old model of, keeping out of sight, and if they don't hear from us, we're doing a good job. No, I think it's, again, back to um, storytelling and engagement, and building the relationships on the front end, so that when that crisis happens, and something will happen at some point, and maybe it's just, a weather event or something like that. But if you've built that relationship on the front end, and you've built trust with the community, that you've been transparent, that you've provided information, then they're going to be more likely, more comfortable to listen when the crisis happens, and that you've got to lead them through, and manage the situation, and continue to provide that information. But I think it's we talked about this earlier. you know I think video is the way to go, because it gives you
Yes.
much more context. Like you said, they hear your voice, they see your face, they know your tone, your cadence, and I think that helps build the trust level that they see. And then, of course, when they do see you out in the street, and that's the reaction we got. Oh, yeah, I know you. You're the town manager, and it's like I like your.
Yes.
Yeah, that's pretty. And they sometimes get very specific. In fact, I just had somebody again at that tournament that said, "Listen, I got a little tip for you in terms I saw what you did in Norton Park, and you were talking about again, it was the paving and the improvements we made, and I happened to put on a vest at the beginning of the video." She says, "You gotta get a better vest. That thing was hanging all over you." I was like, well, because it was a it was an it was not tailored to me. I borrowed it from
Yeah.
our engineer, and it was just like he just grabbed it out of the back seat of his truck,
Was it
and
like a bright yellow
oh,
safety
yeah,
vest?
bright yellow
Yeah,
safety
yeah.
vest, and it was, like, literally hanging off me, and it's just like, and it was just, it's one of those things that, I thank you very much, and I said, "I'm glad you're watching, and thanks for the tip," but that
Love the fashion advice. I like that.
yeah, yeah, so it's been a great
As y'all
it's been a great journey, it's a lot of fun.
That's so cool. As you have kinda gone on this journey, have y'all also found that you have gotten better at telling your story internally to your teams?
Yes, yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up. That's yeah, I have just set the message, or put out the message. I want volunteers. I'm not forcing anyone to, appear in front of a camera if they're not
Mhm.
comfortable, but I'm offering them the opportunity to help tell the story with us. And a plug for our friend Sam Tolles from Civvy Social. He's pretty much taken us to the next level. And so we've
Yeah,
gone from 5 to, 9, 10 other department personnel that are helping it from
yeah,
various departments across the town to help us build the content. But it's yeah, telling having sharing the responsibility, having ownership of the content we're creating, and I think it allows them to tell their stories like the planning department, the engineering department,
mhm.
the library, the list goes on and on, rec department, what are you working on? What's important? What do you think the, residents would like to know about what you're doing? And what do
Yeah,
you think is important? And and then they get the creative juices flowing and the passion that allows me to help them tap into their passion of their department. And it's great to see that evolution and say, "Oh yeah, this is great." Oh, and so they're on fire. They're like, "Yeah, I want to do this because we
yeah.
have so many great things to tell and story to tell." So that's been the most rewarding thing I think so far is to watch that light bulb go off to say, "Oh, I can do that? You're gonna give me permission to do that?" And it's like, yeah, and if you don't wanna be in front of the camera and you just wanna create a great, carousel post with graphics, knock yourself out. If you just wanna take pictures about, you're the engineer, you don't wanna be in front of the camera, but you're in the pit, people love that. You got an open road, you've got the box down there, you got ladders, you got, hard hats, just you got the equipment in the background. That's people love that stuff. The inside
One
look.
of the Yes, the inside look, I found people it's funny, whenever we pull back the curtain on our business or my life or whatever it is, that gets as much engagement as anything. In fact, usually more whenever we say, "Hey, here's what we're in the middle of right now." And I'm always amazed by that fact because people do love that inside look. Now, one of the things I love about creativity and storytelling is the intentionality required. To tell a really good story, you have to be really intentional about how you do it. And I'm wondering if that has not if you've seen some benefits in terms of just internal communication. Because if you've got people on your storytelling squad or what I can't remember the exact name you use for it, but if they're a part of that team, they're being intentional about how they communicate through these videos and through these posts. Are they also then being a little more intentional about how they communicate with another department within the city? Are you seeing any kind of benefits there?
I haven't actually seen that. We were just so early in terms of scratching the surface on, the elements of story. I mean, I'm a student, I'm a lifelong learner. I love to just dive in, and I literally have 2 books on my nightstand by my bed, and trying to read a little bit more about the techniques of storytelling, and then to be able to
Yeah.
pass that on to our group and to the team to see that. And I'm hoping that that will be something that
Yes.
I do see permeate through their actions with other departments and even the
Yeah.
community. And yeah, so no,
Yeah, I
it's
think it
very
is something
powerful. I
you'll
just
see.
haven't learned that skill set yet enough to teach. But again, I'm a
Well, and
student, so I'm learning.
you mentioned Sam's book earlier. What's the title of that book? Do you remember off the top of your head?
I think it's I don't have it in front of me, but it's the playbook, Civi Social Playbook, I think he calls it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a really good book he just put out, and it's specifically for cities, I believe.
Yes,
How do
it
they do
is.
this well? How do they tell their stories? And so it's a really good book that people need to probably dive into.
Absolutely, and
As you've
in fact, chapter 4 is about storytelling, and
yeah,
how to, really practice that, and that's where we're at. We're in the mode of practicing and trying to, apply that.
yeah, and I love that you kind of have this storytelling focus, and you have spent most of your life in public service. And part of what I love about public service is the kind of circuitous route people take to get there. You can come in from any direction and end up in a city manager's office, and there's no one prescribed way. On that journey, obviously, you've had to lead a lot of people through this process. What are some things you have had to wrestle with internally with yourself as you've grown as a leader and as you've grown into these roles?
Well, certainly, one that comes to mind is just, imposter syndrome, right? And I think I've seen a lot of posts recently about that. I've commented and posted myself that I identify with that, that I still wake up, and say, "Wow, how did I end up in this great community of Plainville?" And
Yeah.
it's like, wow, then, it's the experience and just sort of a retake, a refresh to say, "Yeah, wait a minute. You know what? I have learned, I have failed, and I've learned from that, picked myself up and, taken bits and pieces." So, it's like, wait a minute. I think I've learned a lot in this position. I think I've grown a lot in this position to be where I am, and but yet that those those like, how did you get here? Those questions, those voices, come creeping in, and so
Yeah.
yeah, I have a little bit of that, not as much, but it still happens, and I think it's an opportunity. It's like learning to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, I guess, is if
Hmm.
that makes any sense. To push
Yeah.
yourself to do things, and like I said, coming here, social media wasn't in my skill sets, right? It just wasn't, and
Yeah.
so, but unafraid to jump in and learn something, and
Yeah.
that's what I think. It helps reduce the barriers, and so I don't know what else. Imposter syndrome is something, I guess, but
And that's an interesting one because I think everybody suffers with it in some ways. And
right,
it's funny, the second time this has come up today in interviews, but there's a book called The Gap and the Gain. And it's a very simple idea that essentially if you're living in the gap, you are always comparing yourself to some ideal future or some external measure. And you are never going to feel like you succeed there. You're never going to feel like you've made it. And everything that happens to you is then stopping you from getting there. And it just changes your mindset on everything. And I think that's where a lot of imposter syndrome comes from is we're comparing ourselves to some ideal perfect version of ourselves or somebody else that's got it all figured out. And so that's living in the gap, but living in the gain, you are always comparing yourself to the past. You are always looking back and saying, look at how far I've come. I absolutely deserve to be here based on everything I've been through and my ability to navigate challenges. Man, I'm in the right spot. And it's amazing how that one shift in perspective, I think, helps so much with a very common problem because moment to moment, we can all wrestle with that. We can switch to the gap and we're like, oh, yeah, I don't deserve to be in this room. Somebody else, all these people are smarter than me. But then when you look back, you're like, yeah, I've got the experience to be here. I've earned this. And it's
right.
amazing how you can flip that switch.
Right. Yeah, no, that's important. I great perspective. Great. I love the way you framed that. And I'll check out that. Is that a book? That's the gap
Yeah,
the
it's a
game.
book.
Okay.
It's an
Yeah, I'll
easy
check it
read,
out.
The Gap and the Gain. Yes,
Okay.
I've recommended it to a lot of people this year. Um, so as you've kinda gone on that journey, you as you come up through this, and I think you, said you graduated initially with a degree in biology, and I
Correct.
think that's fascinating, and one of the things you mentioned was graduate degree in biology, and immediately was it the Peace Corps you went into?
Correct. Yes. Yeah.
So
I
tell me about how that awakened kind of that heart for service and specifically public service.
Oh, of course. Yeah, I love talking about the Peace Corps. My days after Blackburn College, I had a biology degree. Wasn't quite sure what to do, and I was a fellow student said that they were looking at the Peace Corps, so I started looking into it. And I think I'll step back a moment and say that my junior year at Blackburn, I had an opportunity to do a semester in Europe. And that was my first time traveling outside of the country, and it was like, you know, eye-opening experience, and I thought,
Yeah.
after graduation, yeah, let me look at the Peace Corps. I've always, thought about, service, and, it just clicked. It moved. The process took a while, I think 8 months or longer. But I found myself in Tanzania and East Africa, and, a fisheries my biology degree was, the, um, the path to, Peace Corps as a fisheries volunteer. So,
Mhm.
I was sent off to Tanzania, learned Swahili, and lived in a remote village, with fish farmers, and it was both a income generator and protein source,
Yep.
for the villages and the residents. So, from that, it was just that was it. It lit the fire. I was like, "This is it." I mean, I'm in the zone. I'm like, "This is it." Like, it really yeah, I was doing really important work, I felt like, again, young 22-year-old trying to save the world, right? But, in my little small part of the world, right?
Yeah.
And, it was, a cultural shock, and again, it builds character, it builds strength. It was just a life-changing moment for me in the Peace Corps. So, I ended up, coming back and trying to look for, different positions and didn't succeed and ended up, at Ohio University and getting a master's degree, and then, um looking at, University of Connecticut because I was living in Connecticut and got a master's in public administration, and that's when a position I was halfway through when a position opened up in the town I was living, born and raised in, and got an opportunity as a, entry level executive administrator serving the, first selectman is the term we use, sort of the, mayor, and, that was it. Started my career in the town of Wyndham, and the town I grew up in. So what could be better, right?
There's one of the things you did there is you referred to it as important work.
Yeah,
And when we talk about public service, we talk about it being sacred, about it being worthy of awe and respect. And in the same way, I think there's something to, you're there working on the village's source of both food and income. Every action you take in that work makes that village's life better.
right.
Every single one. It doesn't matter what you're doing. And this is part of what I love about public service is it does not matter what you do. Every action has the potential to make somebody's life better. And
Mhm.
that story is, if we go back to storytelling, helping people hold on to that because you started this because of a deep heart for service to others. I think a lot of people start in public service for that same reason, but by the time they retire, that heart's gone. It's burned out, it's
Mm.
through. They're kind of miserable human beings that nobody wants to work with. I see that in public service happens all the time. How do we use story to tell the story of the sacred purpose they serve and the sacred work they do to keep them engaged, to keep people fired up so that when they retire, that heart for service is just as vibrant as it was when they started? Are there ways we can work on that?
No, absolutely. I think, perspective and reframing, if you will. I'll tell you, I wasn't retired. I'm not retired, but I was burned out. in my previous community, and that's part of the reason I'm here in Plainville is that, like other public servants, there's a fire and then there's a lot of stuff you go through that chips away and or dampens that fire, kind of puts the fire out, right?
Yeah.
And it's maybe you don't even reach retirement, but by the time you get to retirement, to your point, yeah, you no longer have the passion. And how do we reignite the passion, right? And for me, being here in Plainville in a new community, that's part of it. But for me, I really truly believe it's the um, social media aspect at this point that's really kind of given me a new lift,
Yeah.
a new more wind in my sails, so to speak, to try different things and to communicate government. And it's really kind of hit the core, like, yeah, this is what this is all about, right? It's telling the story, getting information out, helping people, right? So I think that's one way, because of what found out is that you know the team around me is much younger, right? So I'm literally the old guy
I
in the
know
room.
how that feels.
You know, so, again, but there's so much to learn, there's so much to give and take in terms of, and so that helps to reignite the passion, right? And so I think if
Mhm.
we can take that in a number of different ways, and I think telling the story about what I like to call of trying to crush the stigma of working in local government or government in general,
Yeah.
right? That wow, they're bureaucratic, red tape. They're no, how are they going to help us get out of our way, kind of thing. But no, we're that's what we do. That's what we provide the services on a daily basis, and we're trying to improve lives. We're not trying to make lives difficult. We're just trying to.
Mhm.
We're all again partners in the same community trying to make it better for everybody. So I think there's a lots of different ways that we can go about it. And I really talk a lot about trying to get more younger people Connecticut into the game, because Connecticut doesn't have a deep bench. I see other states like Texas and Illinois and plenty others that have a very robust and great recruiting effort and a lot of young people entering. Not so much in Connecticut. So I do what I can to talk with others about trying to bring, because I think there's incredible opportunities in local government, especially right here in Connecticut. I talk about a lot. You can write your ticket. If you want, if you've got a accounting or business background, you can go into
Yeah.
finance. You can be the assessor. You can be the tax collector. Building officials. You can come from the trades, walk right into being a building official and code enforcement. You name it. Engineers. You can write your own ticket.
Is there an opportunity there to partner with other cities across the state to say, hey, we together can pool our resources. We can tell this story about why public service matters. And then that benefits everybody. If we get more people moving into this sector, there's a real opportunity there. And you seem like the perfect person to lead that charge.
Well, thank you, Chad. I think so. I think with the state organization, in fact, our annual meeting is next month, and I'm presenting there with Sam. Sam's coming in, which is going to be a great opportunity to talk about that and using social media to engage, but also as a subset. Thank you for the idea. We will try to move that way, and talk about how to build the bench, because we all recognize it's the conversation we're having with each other at those functions to say,
Yeah.
are you able to find, you know, a building sector, and can we share services, because we just don't have the talent there, or the talent
Yeah.
isn't moving into the public sector and local government. So
I
I think
think
it's a
as
great
you'll
idea.
dig into this, well,
Yeah.
as you dig into this more and more, you're going to find that storytelling is the answer for a lot of problems. Once we can really break down very simply, and most of storytelling, I mean, you've already learned this, it's editing. It's how do we take something really complex and make it very simple so that people can process it quickly and then dive in for more information if they want it. And so I think a lot of this you'll find is it will solve retention even. If we can tell the story consistently to our people that are already here, they're less likely to leave. If they leave every day understanding that they made a difference today, they are
Yeah.
far less likely to go take a private sector job. And
Right.
on the recruiting side, if we're telling the story that public service matters, and this is a place you can build a legacy, you're
Mhm.
far more likely to recruit more people. And so that's just one example, but I'm excited as I think you referred to earlier storytelling as the next frontier. And
Yeah.
I really do think as y'all navigate more and more of that frontier, you're going to discover just how powerful it is and how many doors it can unlock on really sticky problems that we've never been able to solve before.
Mhm. Absolutely, I agree with you, and that's why I'm so excited. Just, I mean, like I said before, just scratching the surface on storytelling, but trying to learn as much as I can, and then put it into practice, and it is
Yeah.
powerful, right? And using social media as a way to do that. And I think a lot about the culture. When we talk about you talked about retention. I think about retention and or recruitment in terms of, do I have the right culture here? Am I building the right culture? And in some respects, was, as I told you, burning out with having some toxic type of issues
Mhm.
and relationship in the previous community, and coming here. So that is top of my mind, and
Yeah.
looking at building the right culture, but also from a larger community standpoint, the engagement and storytelling to tell the story of Plainville as a great community, right? And
Yes.
and I will honestly tell you, we started with myself. I hired the assistant town manager, so he started only a month after I did, or 2 months after I did, and we got together with the economic development director, and it was a push on social media for, like I said, businesses, and from an economic development standpoint, from my position and competing with the other 168 other towns within Connecticut, because we're so small and everything's so close, that it's like, I wanna grow the grand list. That was my single focus when I started, was just, if it would be a success if I just grew the grand list and talked about using social media to talk about our businesses and what we have here and why this community is attractive and why you wanna do business here. So, that is obviously morphed into a larger,
Yes.
discussion about engagement and everything else the community has, but it's still storytelling. That's the key.
Mhm.
That's the linkage, that's the power, that's the leverage, if you will. And so, that's what
It's
we're gonna do.
everything. Well,
Yeah.
and you talked about that culture that you want. The way you create that culture is with story, because you initially have to paint the picture of what you even want, and you do that with language. You do that with values and shared language that we use to navigate and create. And so you're onto something really powerful there. And one of the things you talked about was just the fact that there's not as many people coming into public service. What is the story you would tell them? What would you tell a young person who is looking at various private sector things to say, "Hey, what about public service? Have you considered that?"
Yeah.
What advice would you give them?
Well, I'd start with what you mentioned, that it's an opportunity to make the difference in someone's life every day. Every day.
Yeah.
And maybe it doesn't happen every day, but you have the opportunity every time you pick up the phone, right? Somebody calls in, somebody's got maybe it's a complaint, they're not happy,
Yeah.
but and that they're upset, and you take that information, you guide them to the person that can give them the right answer, then they're going to feel better. Even that's a win in terms of feeling better and
Yes.
getting the answers, and moving forward, so that there's something very rewarding about being in public service, that I think people can really connect with. And if we
Yes.
create the right culture that is positive culture, uh, internally, and we happen to be a community that also has a 4-day work week, which I think puts us
Mhm.
in a different category in terms of
Yep.
recruitment and retention, to have a 4-day work week, and that sets us apart. But again, culture and the opportunity, professional development is got to be an option for people to succeed, having upward mobility. Not always the case, because sometimes we have departments of one. That's it.
Yeah.
You're the engineer. We now have grown to be having an assistant engineer. Okay, great, but you might just be the planner, and that's it. There's no assistant planner. Some of the small communities, and we're 17,000 in terms of population, so we're a small
Mhm.
town. We're not a big city that's going to have a very large department. So, but to be happy in that position, to be the best planner you can be for Plainville, or to be the
Yeah.
best engineer you can be for Plainville, and making a difference when people appreciate, residents appreciate, they get that street paved that they haven't seen in 30 years, and it's all
Yep.
broken up and whatever, or just getting new sidewalks, or a new addition to basketball courts in Norton Park, or whatever is we do in the school system, school side, supporting that and making sure that the children are getting a great education. So I would I stress the impact that you make, that you can.
Yes. And one of the things you said is it might not be every day. I would argue it is literally every moment of every day. In some way, whatever you do, every action you take, if you are sitting staring at a spreadsheet, that is making somebody's life better, because if you're doing it well, it is contributing to the greater good. And I think if we can get people to understand the most mundane things they do make people's lives better, that
Mhm.
becomes exciting. That gives meaning to the mundane, and it gives a
Right.
reason to show up and do it. And so I think you're onto something there. It is, I think I I think about private sector, they don't have that same ability to tell that story. They talk about changing the world with all their products and all this,
Yeah.
but at the end of the day, really it's in service of we gotta make some money. Y'all
The
are
bottom line.
purely service. Like, do you
Service.
bring in revenue? Yes. But at the end of the day, you're not trying to just increase revenue. You're trying to increase service. And I think there's something pure about that story can be really, really appealing.
I agree.
One of the things you mentioned was in your last city, you burned out a little bit. And so part of the reason we're doing this is to further conversations about how our people can thrive. How do we set up a journey in public service where people are not burning out, where they can serve 20, 30, 40 years and love the journey and not burn out in the process. And we always talk about the idea that ultimately public service, you're doing too much with too little for too long, and that is
Mm,
not sustainable.
right.
So what are some things cities need to rethink in order to create more sustainability for their teams and their people?
Well, that's a great question. I think a lot of it has to do with resources, but it's also not just solely resources, but the atmosphere, right? So I think if you're building trust and support, right? So I think for a lot of individuals, they don't obviously nobody appreciates being micromanaged and somebody looking over their shoulder, but you trust that they can do the job, that you're giving them the
Yeah.
training and support to do their job, and then resources if possible. And again, that's the tricky part, is the balance between what you'd like to support in terms of resources, and then ultimately that has to be approved by the voters, and in terms of a budget, right? So but I think if you try to bring all of that together and begin with support and trust and then resources, I think there's a formula there that can work effectively.
Yeah. I think you're right about that, because we talk about the idea that as humans, while we're all pretty different, we're all wired basically the same. We want to be supported, we want to be heard, we want to be loved. And
Mm,
I may not be able to pay you what you can get in the private sector, but if I care about you and you walk away every day knowing my city cares about me, they're supporting me, they want what's best, that goes a long way. That's really powerful. And I think there's something to being able to express that care in ways other than money. And that comes down to just day-to-day interactions. When I'm interacting with a leader, do I feel like they care about me, or do I feel like they're just trying to get on to the next task? And
mhm.
that makes a huge difference in how people go home every day.
Yeah, no, it's a I have many flaws myself, and in trying to be a better communicator
Welcome, so do
is
I.
one of you know, but being to realize that, communicating and to something you said, we're actually, I'm in the process of doing evaluations annually because our budget is set for July 1st.
Mhm.
And so we like to do May and June leading into any increases in terms of
Yeah.
performance and so forth. But the evaluation process is a give and take. And so I love when I hear the feedback like I have this morning that, oh gosh, the atmosphere has changed here. Not that it wasn't bad; it was okay under, so and
Yeah.
so. It was great, but you've just, you've opened up. I feel much more comfortable, and the atmosphere has changed in a positive way. That's great to hear feedback for me to hear and for me to do more of it. Right, to do more of the
Yes.
team building, to say, just as you said, we're human, we're creatures that want to know that we're succeeding, that we need the
Mhm.
feedback,
Yeah.
and we want to feel like we've been heard. And that just not only in your employees, but in your residents.
Yeah. And that's work that's never done. The team building and we reference the second law of thermodynamics talks about the idea that everything is naturally moving towards disorganization. And so we can put some work in and get the team moving in the right direction. If we don't continue that work, they're just naturally going to scatter like sheep. And so we're always having to push them back into shape and say, no, don't forget, this is how we're doing this. But that work is the most important work leaders do. It is the ongoing work of improving in the culture that you want to have. And it takes so much intentionality. And it sounds like it takes intentionality, but what you have done there is also created some safety. With open communication, with transparency, people feel safe. They feel cared for and supported. And so it sounds like you're doing a very good job of that.
Well, thank you. At least in some areas I am, and there's still more improvement to go. More, again, I have to I have to sometimes tell myself, it's just I have to be present.
Yeah.
Right? You have to be present. You have to be conscious and aware of how you communicate, and all of that. I'm sure you're a student as well, and understand that there's
Mhm.
ways to communicate.
It's ongoing work, always a practice. Michael, thank you so much for doing this. This was an
Well,
incredible conversation. I have had an absolute blast.
yeah, me too. Thank you, Chad. I really appreciate the opportunity. It's been great talking with you, and we'll definitely have to get together in person at some point.
I tell you what, I think I'm most likely going to be at ICMA. So if I see you there,
Oh,
remind me I've got a challenge coin for you.
okay, fantastic.
Thank you, sir.
Love to see you there. Thanks, Chad.
Thank you for joining us for Leading Thriving Cities. You might also like our other podcast, The Leader Lab. You can find it on all the major podcast platforms and on YouTube. Just search for The Leader Lab. Each episode is under 10 minutes. It's just a quick thought to help you level up your leadership. You'll also find all the other leadership content we are putting out on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Just search for @ForwardPartner.